dear creatives, welcome to another fascinator making tutorial, and in today's tutorial I'll be teaching us how to make the popular spotted birdcage veil fascinator. So what are the materials you need very quickly? You need your birdcage veil, which is this. You need your Alice band, and then you need your fluffy rods. So this is what is called a fluffy rod. So you need different colors of fluffy rods. I think this is sold for 100 naira at the market. Some places you get it for 150. So basically these are the things you need, and then you need your glue. So without wasting much time, let's get started. So the first thing to do here is to measure out your birdcage veil. Now usually for this particular fascinator, when you want to work accurately, you are required to first of all measure your Alice band. So you measure the full length of your Alice band, and usually Alice band measures 14.5 inches to 14.75. On rare cases, you see 14 inches. So let's measure to know what this is. So I've started. You take a measurement from this angle down here, and then what do we have? Yes, 14.5. You see, I was very right. So this is a 14.5-inch Alice band. Now, as required, you are supposed to replicate the same measurement for your veil, but because you want to allow for allowance on the face of whoever is wearing it, so that it will not be too tight, you'll be adding a little bit of ease allowance on your veil. I go over that again. To allow for allowance and ease for the person wearing it, you are required to add a bit of allowance to your veil. So instead of me cutting 14.75 that I have on my Alice band, I'll be cutting out 16 inches. I'll be cutting out 16 inches. So please don't stretch when you're cutting out. Let me just lay it. So this is my 16 inches, and then I am going to use my scissors to cut this out. Please take note of this particular step. Do not cut out exactly what you have on your Alice band. So when you cut it out, the next thing you want to do is to gather this end together. You gather one end together. You gather your ends together. Please take very good notes. Gather the ends together, and then you place it here on one end of your Alice band. Now this is where you'll be needing your needle and thread. When you do this, you open up. So once you put this point you have gathered on one end of your Alice band, you put it down. Then the next thing you are going to do is to tie. Please take very good note. We are going to tie. So please ensure that when you're working, you take note of this particular part. So I'm going to tie now, and after tying one end, I'm going to replicate the same process for the other side. So I'm going to tie. So I've tied this particular end, I've tied one end, so I'm going to be repeating the same process for the other side. So the way I tie this part, I'm also going to do the same thing for here. Remember, you are going to gather and then tie. So I'll tie as I did for this place, and then I'll show us the next step after this. So I have done the same for the other side, and this is what I have. So let's just see. We first of all secured both ends of our veil to our Alice band, and this is what you have. So the next thing to do here to note is the fact that it's time to attach this particular part of our veil to the Alice band. You can't leave it like this. It doesn't make any sense. So this particular process is the part where you have to use your hand to sew this down. So it's a thorough hand work process. Now, if you can see, I have excess of my veil to my Alice band length. Remember I told you I had to do that so that's to allow for allowance for the person wearing it. So now the question is, how do you now take care of this excess? Now the first thing you want to do is to use your veil to match your Alice band, to know the length you need and the length you need to tuck in on the edges or on the two ends you tie together. So what I'm trying to say is that you want to measure your veil alongside the top of your Alice band the way I'm doing. Please take note of this process. You do this, then you use that one to know what allowance or excess is left for you to tuck in on both ends. So this is what I have left. I have about 2 inches left, which means that these 2 inches, I'm going to be tucking both ends down on each side of my Alice band where I first of all tied. So now this is what you do. You do a single pleat just like this. Remember I said the reason why you're doing this is to allow for allowance. If not, this thing would discomfort the person wearing it, and most times it even enters the eye. So you're going to give it a single pleat. Let me bring it closer to the camera. Look at what I'm doing. Just one pleat down. And then you pass your needle and thread through and you begin to sew. Just one pleat down, you pass the needle and thread through and you begin to sew. So right now it's time to go with my needle and thread, and I'm going to start from that part that I tied. So I'm going to pick it in gently. You have to be this gentle at this point, and then I'll pass it in again and bring it out of my pleat gently. For this type of needle I'm using, I'm working with a beading needle because this needle is what can enter into my Alice band such that it will not show what I want to do. So at this point, because we're not putting anything on top, your work must be as neat as possible. So I'm sewing through my pleats now. You have to be very, very neat. For this end, don't worry, we're going to be covering it. So even if your sewing is not neat on the end, you are covered because we're going to be covering it with a Peter Shams. So I'll keep sewing until I've sewed down my first pleat on this end. Now, as you can see, I have attached my first pleat. Can you see? So now it's time to sew all across around my Alice band. So I'll bring this out again and I'll keep sewing. So now that I have already sewed down my first pleat, how do I attach my veil to my Alice band? Now take note of what I'm about to say here. For this particular fascinator, you have to make use of a covered Alice band. If you don't have a covered Alice band, ensure you cover your Alice band by yourself. I have a short on how to cover your Alice band if you don't know how to cover your Alice band. So just check amongst one of my videos, you see how to cover your Alice band. So now, look at it. Your veil has tiny, tiny joining holes that are quite diagonal, and that's why it's called the birdcage veil. Can you see? Can you see these things that connect each is it a trapezium shape or a kite shape, I don't know, to each other? So in between you see those holes. So these are the holes we're going to be sewing through when we want to attach this to our Alice band. So just watch as I do this so carefully. Don't worry, I'm not going to fast track the video here so that we can grasp. So the first thing you do is you take your needle, you pass it underneath your Alice band, underneath the cover of your Alice band, and then you bring it out of one of those holes. Don't worry, you have to keep working until you get what you are looking for. So you bring it out of one of those holes, and once you bring it out of one of those holes, you pull out, and then you continue to sew like that. You take it in again inside it, and you bring it out of one of those holes again. Please, your sewing must be all inside. Anyone that has to show, it must not be very, very visible. Oh. That's why I'm trying to work as much as we can get what I'm doing. So again, I'll take it in, and then I'll bring it out through one of those holes again, and I'll take it in again. I'll bring it out one of those holes again, and this is what I'm going to do until I get to the end of my veil on the Alice band. So can you see? Can you see? I'm taking it in. This particular process is very important because you want your work to be as neat as possible. And this is one thing that I always like to tell my students. What will distinguish you from other creators or other art designers is how neat and well detailed your work is. I most times use my hands to make arts without using glues because my hand would ensure the fact that there's durability of the arts and 100% neatness is assured. So can you see? After that sewing down, now if you look closely, can you see my seams? It's not so visible. So I'm going to continue this particular procedure until I get to the other end of my Alice band. Now when I get to the other end of my Alice band, just where I pleated here, I'm also going to pleat down there. But before I do that, I'm going to show us what I have done when I'm done with this process. So dear creative, I've got to the second end of my Alice band, and this is what I have just very left. Can you see this small thing? This is what I have. So like I did for the first one, I'm just going to pleat this down and use my needle and thread to sew it down to the end where I tied. So it's just so easy. This is one of the easiest fascinators to make under 20 minutes if you are very, very good at what you do. And that's why I created this video, to be so detailed, so that it will help us to know how to make this type of fascinator. So I'm just going to do that, and then as usual I'm going to pass my needle and thread through it again, and then that closes the chapter of fixing your veil to your Alice band. It's just so simple. So I'll do that and then show us the next step in making this fascinator. So there, creatives, I'm done with attaching my veil to my Alice band, and that closes the chapter for that. But can you see our ends? They are open, and this doesn't present our work so well. It doesn't make it so neat. So what do you do at this point? The thing you want to do here is to cover this part. So now if you have to trim whatever you have here so as to make your covering well covered or work very well, please do well to trim it. Probably if you have bulk here, you don't need bulk, so trim it. So the question is, what do you use to cover it? Now you need your Peter Shams here. Peter Shams. So if you cannot get Peter Shams at the market, then you can work with your velvet Peter Sham. So this is the actual size of a Peter Sham, but the one I have here is a velvet Peter Sham. So what you simply do is, well, you cut out 1 inch for both sides. So I'm going to cut out 1 inch, just 1 inch. Please take note. This is what I'll do, 1 inch, and then I'll cut it out. When I cut it out, I'm going to be using my glue to attach it to the end of my, to this end, just to cover it. This is what we want to do. We don't want our work to be exposed. So if you don't have a Peter Sham, I repeat, now if you don't have this, you can use a cloth, you can use a fabric. Just make sure that your work is neat. Just cover. If it's a black cloth you have, but make sure that the black cloth is such that can work for this purpose. So you use your glue, as you say, where I'm doing this, apply your glue on it, wait for it to solidify, and then you cover it. So I just apply my glue on both of this, and then I'll show us what to do next. So now my glue already solidified, and what would I do? I'll just place it here. Please ensure you are diligent at this point. Place it this way, and then I'll take it to the back just to cover it very well, and I'll then take this one too to the back. So at the back where both meet, turn your fascinator and cover it so well. Ensure that the last part that you cut is not showing at this outer part. Please take note of that. So then you press it down to ensure that it has glued so properly. So I'll repeat the same process for this other side and then show us what to do next. So right now I have covered both ends, and this is what we have. So now the beautiful thing about this fascinator is you can rock it this way. But for extra details, we decided to, you know what, beautify it with our fluffy rods. So now for the fluffy rods, how exactly do you use this to design this? So the first thing you want to do with your fluffy rods is to cut them into small bits. So just cut them into small bits, very small bits. So you cut them into small bits like so, and then the next thing you want to do after cutting them into small bits is to roll. So now there are different ways of actually using your fluffy rods to embellish your fascinator, but in today's tutorial I'll be teaching us the rolling method. So this is what I have. So you roll, so you cut them into small bits and you roll, just roll. Now this method of embellishing is called the rolling method. I could decide not to roll, just to use them like this, but if I want to use them like this, they will obviously not be as long as this. So you roll, please make sure you roll. The wire inside is flexible, so roll and roll to the size you want. So this is it. So you roll your fluffy rods. So now I'm going to cut out as many as I need for this, and I am going to now roll, and once I'm done rolling, I'll show us the next thing to do. So I'm done rolling and cutting out my fluffy rods. So the next thing to do after this particular process is to use your gum to attach this to your veil. So this process, you have to work with your glue and ensure that whatever glue you are working with is very, very strong. It's not the one that was removed after a few use of the fascinator. So what do you want to do? You take your, and then you use the tip, just put small. When you put small, you pick your veil, and then at whatever point you like, just attach. You do something. So I'm going to put it here. So you're going to spot it. That's why it's called spotted. You are putting it at different parts. It's not like you're going to make it so concentrated at one central point. No. So you're going to put it, scatter it at different points on your fascinator. So that's what you're going to do. So I'm going to do the second one and just put it anywhere I like, as I like. So I'm just spotting it all over. So once I do this, I'm going to repeat the same process. Now, the quantity you want to use is left for you to decide. The choice is all yours as to how many of this you want to use, but ensure it's not so concentrated. I repeat, ensure it's not so concentrated. So I'm going to keep attaching this, and then once I'm done with it, I'll come back to show us the finished look of our art. So dear creatives, this is the finished look after spotting. So can you see? Now, one tip I want to tell us when spotting is ensure that your spots do not cover the eyesight of the veil. If you don't know how to get the exact point where the eyes will be when wearing the veil, you're advised to use a mannequin. So place it on the mannequin. So locate the part where the eye of the mannequin is and the nose. Don't go and block the eye and the nose because it will not make the art make so much sense. So this is what it looks like. Isn't this looking beautiful? So this has brought us to the end of this particular tutorial. So I come by again. Don't forget to subscribe if you are yet to subscribe, and if you have, ensure to turn on the notification bell to get notified of our videos as they drop. Till I come by, see you, bye.